My name is Carla. 3 months ago, during what was supposed to be the proudest moment of my career, my manager publicly humiliated me in front of the entire executive team. He yanked the HDMI cable right out of my laptop mid-sentence and said, loud enough for the boardroom and the interns in the hallway to hear, "That's enough. Let someone competent talk." The room went silent. I remember standing there, staring at the blank screen, feeling the kind of numbness that comes before either tears or fury. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. What he didn't know was that the timing of his cruelty couldn't have been more perfect. Because while he thought he was destroying me, my phone buzzed with the message that would change everything. Before I tell you exactly what that message said, and how it became the weapon that brought his entire career to its knees, please make sure you're listening closely, because what happened next proves one thing. When someone tries to bury you, they might just be planting the seed of their own downfall. Let me take you back to where this story really began. Because stories like this never start with the revenge. They start with the first crack in the glass. 18 months earlier, I joined Veridian Systems, a mid-sized tech firm that specialized in data visualization software. I was brought on as a strategic analyst, a fancy title for person who makes complex data look simple enough for executives to pretend they understand it. My boss, Martin Crane, had been with the company for 12 years. He was one of those managers who mistook intimidation for leadership. If you didn't agree with him, you were too emotional. If you spoke up with confidence, you were aggressive. He especially hated when a woman got more attention in meetings than he did. During my first few months, I learned to stay quiet, to speak only when called upon, to make my points sound like his ideas. But I couldn't keep doing that forever, especially when I realized our company was heading for disaster. I discovered a pattern of data errors in our client reporting system. Numbers that didn't add up, visualizations that misrepresented financial outcomes, and projections that made our clients look more profitable than they really were. It wasn't fraud, but it was dangerously close. I spent weeks cross-referencing client records, recalculating models, and building a new framework that corrected those errors. When I showed it to Martin, expecting gratitude, he didn't even look up from his phone. He muttered, "Just stick to your lane, Carla. We don't need another perfectionist slowing down the process." That night, I stayed at the office until 2 a.m., running simulations to prove that my corrected model could save Veridian from an impending client exodus. I wasn't doing it for glory. I was doing it because I believed in the work. The next morning, the CEO stopped by our department. Martin presented my findings as his own. He even used my phrasing when he described the problem. I stood there, smiling, clapping with everyone else, my stomach churning. I thought, fine, let him take the credit. I'll keep my head down. But things escalated. Martin started scheduling client review meetings without inviting me. He forwarded my reports under his name. He even told HR that I needed supervision after I corrected one of his miscalculations during a team call. The worst part? Everyone saw what he was doing, but no one spoke up. Not even the people I thought were my friends. Then came the global tech proposal, a $20 million partnership deal that could double Veridian's market share. I was put in charge of building the data model, the visual strategy, and the entire presentation. For 6 weeks, I worked nonstop. Late nights, cold coffee, empty takeout boxes. My slides were flawless. My analysis airtight. The CEO himself said, "This could make Veridian a major player." And that's what led to the morning that changed everything. I walked into the boardroom early, set up my presentation, checked the sound, made sure the connection was stable. My hands trembled slightly, but it wasn't nerves. It was adrenaline. This was the moment my work would finally speak for itself. Martin entered 5 minutes late, coffee in hand, arrogance in his stride. "Try not to bore them, Carla," he whispered as he sat. The room filled. Executives, investors, the global tech delegation, our CEO. I started speaking, guiding them through my slides, explaining the new predictive model that could save millions. Heads nodded. The CEO smiled. Even the investors leaned in. That's when Martin stood up. He walked over to my laptop, leaned in close, and said in a voice dripping with sarcasm, "All right, that's enough. Let someone competent talk." Then he yanked the cable. The screen went black. The room froze. My ears rang. And then, my phone buzzed. One new message. The timing was surreal. I glanced at it. The subject line read, "Offer confirmation, $600,000 annual package." I looked up, met Martin's smug gaze, and said quietly, "Perfect timing. I'll take the position." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" I smiled for the first time that morning, because what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Global Tech's board had been watching me for weeks, and they hadn't called to discuss data. They called because they were ready to make me an offer. When I walked out of that conference room, my hands were still trembling, but not from humiliation this time. It was adrenaline. For 18 months, I'd swallowed every insult, every stolen idea, every smirk from Martin Crane. And in less than 30 seconds, karma had finally decided to clock in. I remember standing by the elevator, still hearing faint murmurs from the boardroom. Martin's voice was low but frantic. The CEO sounded confused. Someone asked, "Did she just say 600,000?" I smiled. The message on my phone was still glowing on the screen. Offer confirmation, $600,000 annual package plus signing bonus. Please confirm availability for onboarding call today. Just hours earlier, I had thought that message might never come. Let me explain. 2 months before that disastrous presentation, I attended a leadership summit in Chicago. Veridian had sent me there mostly because Martin didn't want to go. He said he was too busy managing real projects, which was ironic considering I did all the work he claimed as his own. At that conference, I met Elena Park, a senior executive from Global Tech, the same company we were pitching to that morning. She led a session on data ethics and client transparency, topics that aligned perfectly with the model I had been developing. After her talk, I approached her, nervous but curious. "I really admire what you said about integrity and data representation," I told her. She smiled warmly. "It's rare to hear that from someone who actually works in analytics. Most people just care about numbers, not the truth behind them." That single conversation turned into a 30-minute discussion about business ethics, human-centered analytics, and how corporate culture often rewards the wrong people. I didn't mention Martin by name, but I hinted at what was happening at Veridian. When the conference ended, she handed me her card and said, "If you ever find yourself needing a place that values what you do, call me." I never thought I'd actually use it. Back at Veridian, things only got worse. Martin started locking access to project files I'd created, claiming he didn't want inconsistencies. He scheduled team reviews where he'd nitpick my work in front of junior staff. Once, after I corrected him on a small data error during a client call, he muted the line and hissed, "You ever do that again, I'll make sure you never work in this field again." That was the day I emailed Elena. "Hi, Elena. This is Carla from the Chicago Summit. I think that time might have come." She replied the same afternoon. "Let's talk." We scheduled a virtual meeting for the next day. It wasn't a job interview in the traditional sense. She already knew my background, my work, my values. Instead, she asked questions like, "What kind of culture do you want to work in? And what would you change if you could build a data division from scratch?" By the end of the call, she said, "We've been quietly building a new analytics branch here. We need someone who actually understands relationships between data, clients, and people. Would you be interested in leading it?" I didn't say yes right away. I still had loyalty to Veridian, even after everything. I wanted to finish the Global Tech presentation first, to prove my worth, to have something tangible that no one could take from me. But then came the morning of the presentation. When Martin yanked that cable and called me incompetent, something inside me snapped. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. I realized in that moment that I didn't owe Veridian anything. Not my silence. Not my loyalty. Not another second of my effort. So when my phone buzzed and I saw Elena's message confirming the offer, It felt almost supernatural, like fate had been waiting for the exact second Martin crossed the line. I didn't go back to my desk. Instead, I walked out of the building, down the glass staircase, and into the cold morning air. I called Elena from the street corner. She answered on the first ring. "Carla, did you get my message?" "I did," I said, trying to sound calm, though my pulse was racing. The timing was interesting. "Oh?" she asked. "My manager just tried to publicly humiliate me during a presentation." There was a pause. Then Elena said quietly, "Then I think this offer couldn't have come at a better time." She outlined the details again. Base salary, signing bonus, relocation support if needed, and a director of strategic analytics title. I asked, "Why me?" Her answer stuck with me. "Because we've been watching Viridian for months. We saw who was really behind the improvements in their client metrics. You're the reason their data integrity scores improved. And because integrity matters more to us than politics." When I hung up, I leaned against the building, letting the reality settle in. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I texted her back one line. "I accept." Effective immediately. Then I looked up at the Viridian logo etched into the glass doors and whispered, "Game over." What I didn't know then was that my acceptance would trigger a domino effect that none of us could have predicted. Within days, everything Martin had built around his illusion of competence would begin to unravel, piece by piece, and all I had to do was step aside and let him destroy himself. The morning after I accepted the global tech offer, I woke up before sunrise, half expecting to feel guilt or fear. Instead, I felt nothing but relief, the kind of quiet that follows when you finally stop holding your breath. I brewed my coffee, sat on my couch, and opened my laptop. My inbox was a battlefield. 42 unread messages from Viridian, most marked urgent. Martin had sent 5 himself, each one more desperate than the last. "Where are you? We need to discuss yesterday's presentation. CEO wants an explanation for your behavior. Call me immediately. This is insubordination." I didn't respond. I didn't even open them. For 18 months, I had allowed him to dictate when I spoke, when I worked, when I was allowed to have an opinion. Not anymore. At 9 a.m., I sent a single email. Subject: resignation. Effective immediately. Martin, please consider this my formal resignation from Viridian Systems, effective today. I appreciate the opportunities I had to grow professionally, and I wish the team continued success. Regards, Carla James. I clicked send, shut my laptop, and let out a deep breath. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Carla? This is Patrick Miles, CEO of Viridian." His voice was calm but strained. "I just saw your resignation. Martin tells me there was some kind of misunderstanding yesterday?" I smiled to myself. "If you call public humiliation a misunderstanding, then yes, that's accurate." He sighed. "Look, Martin can be abrasive, but we're all under pressure. That global tech deal is crucial for us. I'd hate to lose you over a personality conflict, Patrick," I said carefully. "With all due respect, this isn't a personality conflict. It's a leadership failure. I've done everything to support this company, but yesterday made one thing clear. I'm done working under someone who mistakes control for competence." There was silence. Then he said, "Understood. Still, I'd appreciate if you could forward the presentation you were showing yesterday. Martin claims it wasn't complete." That made me laugh softly. He'd say that. The presentation was finished weeks ago. In fact, it's already on Global Tech's internal server. He hesitated. "What do you mean, their server?" "Because," I said, standing up and slipping on my coat, "as of this morning, I'm Global Tech's new director of strategic analytics. Have a good day, Patrick." The silence on the line was golden. By Monday, word had spread through the industry like wildfire. I didn't post anything dramatic. Just updated my LinkedIn headline, Director of Strategic Analytics at Global Tech. Within hours, my notifications exploded. Former colleagues messaged me congratulations. Some admitted they'd always known Martin was the real problem. A few hinted they were quietly looking for new jobs themselves. And then there was Martin. At 3:15 p.m., I received an email from him with no greeting, no signature. Just 6 words. "What did you tell Global Tech about us?" I didn't reply, but part of me wanted to. Because the truth was, I hadn't told Global Tech anything bad about Viridian. I didn't have to. They already knew. Elena had explained it during one of our onboarding calls. "We've been monitoring Viridian's data output for months. After your conference presentation last year, we started tracking how their models changed. We could tell when your work was being sidelined. The quality drop was measurable. In other words, Martin had exposed himself without realizing it. Meanwhile, Viridian's chaos was growing. Through a friend in the finance department, I heard that Global Tech's board had postponed the partnership discussions. They wanted clarification on data discrepancies, issues that had appeared after my departure. Apparently, the models Martin had claimed to oversee were now full of errors. When executives tried to reproduce my results, nothing matched. By the end of the week, 3 clients had paused contracts, citing concerns about data integrity. The irony was painful and perfect. One afternoon, while unpacking boxes in my new office, Elena stopped by. "You might want to see this," she said, handing me her tablet. On the screen was an industry news article. Viridian Systems faces client audit following data irregularities. Below it, a photo of Martin standing behind a podium, looking exactly like the kind of man who blamed everyone else when things went wrong. I couldn't help but laugh. "He's probably telling the board I sabotaged him." Elena smiled. "Probably. But don't worry, the numbers speak for themselves. We're already in talks to acquire Viridian's remaining clients." I blinked. "You're buying them out?" "Possibly. Their credibility's collapsing fast. When you build success on someone else's work, it always catches up." That night, I sat alone in my apartment, reflecting on everything. I hadn't planned any of this. I hadn't sabotaged him or leaked information. I'd simply done my job well, cared about the details, and walked away when respect ran out. And somehow, that alone was enough to start an avalanche. It hit me then. The quiet power of doing the right thing even when no one notices. Because eventually, the truth has a way of becoming louder than any humiliation. By the end of the month, Martin's name disappeared from Viridian's leadership page. Word was he'd been reassigned pending investigation. Global Tech had officially terminated their partnership talks. And me? I was preparing to lead the biggest project of my career. What I didn't know yet was that Martin wasn't done trying to save himself. And his next move would cross a line I never expected him to cross. 2 weeks after Martin's name vanished from Viridian's leadership page, I thought it was over. I'd started settling into my new life. Longer hours, yes, but also genuine respect. At Global Tech, people listened when I spoke. My ideas weren't dismissed as emotional, my reports weren't renamed under someone else's account, and my weekends were finally my own. For the first time in years, I felt safe. Until the email arrived. It was a Thursday morning. I was reviewing client analytics with my team when my phone buzzed with a private notification. The sender's name made my stomach drop. Martin Crane. Subject: "You've made a serious mistake. Carla, you may think you've gotten away with sabotaging me, but I've spoken to people at Global Tech. They're going to find out what you did. You used proprietary data from Viridian in your new role. That's a breach of contract and potentially criminal. You should come clean before it gets worse." For a full minute, I just stared at the screen. Then I laughed softly, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. It was a desperate man's email. Still, the accusation was serious. I knew I hadn't taken anything from Viridian, but rumors like that can destroy reputations. So I forwarded the message to Elena and our legal department with a short note. "Received this from Martin Crane." For transparency, within an hour, Elena called me. "We'll handle it," she said firmly. "We already ran a full audit before you started. You didn't bring over a single document or dataset. He's bluffing." She was right. But Martin didn't stop. 2 days later, a professional contact sent me a screenshot from LinkedIn. Martin had posted a thinly veiled statement. It's unfortunate when disloyal employees profit from information they never built. No names, but everyone in our circle knew who he meant. I wanted to ignore him, but something told me it wouldn't stop there. And I was right. That Monday morning, Global Tech's IT department flagged unusual login attempts to our internal server. Someone from an external IP address was trying to access restricted folders connected to my projects. Elena called me into her office immediately. "We traced the source," she said, turning her screen toward me. "It's coming from Viridian's network." My pulse quickened. "You think it's him?" She nodded. "We can't be certain yet, but given the timing, yes." It was surreal. Martin had gone from humiliating me to impersonating me. And in doing so, he'd crossed a line that could cost him far more than his job. Global Tech's security team launched an internal investigation and informed Viridian's corporate counsel. Within 48 hours, they confirmed what we all suspected. The unauthorized logins were traced directly to Martin's old credentials. Apparently, he'd tried to download several data models, ones he believed I had built using Viridian's proprietary frameworks. What he didn't realize was that I had designed those frameworks myself, entirely from scratch on my own time, before Viridian ever implemented them. He wasn't stealing company property. He was trying to steal mine. When the findings came out, Elena asked if I wanted to pursue legal action. I didn't answer right away. I sat in silence for a while, remembering the day he'd yanked the cable and called me incompetent. The heat of humiliation, the laughter in the room, the ache of staying quiet for so long. Then I looked up and said, "No. Let the truth speak for itself." She nodded, understanding. "It already is." Because while the investigation unfolded, Viridian's reputation was unraveling faster than anyone predicted. Clients were leaving in waves. Their financial reports leaked online, showing plummeting revenue and mounting legal costs. It turned out that Martin had been their primary contact for several accounts now filing breach of contract claims over faulty analytics. Global Tech's legal team didn't need to lift a finger. His downfall was writing itself. One evening, just before leaving the office, my phone buzzed again. Another email from Martin. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was almost pitiful. Subject: I made a mistake. "Carla, I didn't mean for things to go this far. They're blaming me for everything. You don't understand what's happening here. Please, if there's any way you could tell them I didn't steal your work, I'd appreciate it." I read it twice, then deleted it. No reply, no satisfaction, just silence. Because that's the part people never talk about. The quiet after revenge completes itself. It's not joy. It's peace. By the end of that week, Martin's name appeared in a public industry notice. Former Viridian executive under investigation for corporate misconduct. I didn't share it, didn't comment, didn't celebrate. But I saved the article, not as a trophy, just as a reminder. Sometimes the most poetic justice doesn't come from striking back. It comes from letting people trip over the mess they built for themselves. And though I thought this was the end, I was wrong again. Because what happened next would turn that quiet peace into something far greater than revenge. Something I never expected to find in the wreckage of it all. It's strange how endings rarely feel the way you imagine they will. I used to think that when Martin finally got what he deserved, I'd feel triumphant. Vindicated. But when it actually happened, what I felt was quiet. It was a cold Monday morning, about 3 months after the investigation began. I was walking into the Global Tech headquarters when my phone buzzed with a message from Elena. "Check your email." You'll want to see this. I opened it before I even reached my desk. Attached was a link to a public document, an official court filing. Martin Crane versus Viridian Systems, wrongful termination and defamation. But there was more. At the bottom of the document, a note from the judge. Case dismissed. Evidence supports termination for cause it was over. Veridian had turned against him completely. The company's internal audit had confirmed the unauthorized logins, the client losses, and even falsified data he'd submitted to cover his mistakes. The board had not only fired him, but formally barred him from ever returning to a management position in the company. I sat there, staring at my screen, letting it sink in. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even relieved. It just felt final. Like watching the last page of a long, painful book turn itself. Later that week, Elena called me into her office. "You've done incredible work here, Carla," she said, motioning for me to sit. "We've grown faster than projected, and the way you've rebuilt trust with our clients, it's exceptional." I smiled, still unsure where this was going. She continued, "We've decided to create a new department, one focused entirely on ethical analytics and human-centered strategy, and we want you to lead it. Full autonomy. Your vision, your team." I blinked. "You're serious?" "Completely. We want to do what Veridian never could. Build something that values integrity over ego." For the first time, I didn't feel like I was proving anything to anyone. I wasn't trying to outrun the humiliation anymore. I was building something better from it. A few weeks later, I received a message from an unfamiliar email address. No subject line, just a few simple words. "I heard you're doing well. I hope you're happy now." I stared at it for a long time. No threats, no excuses, no blame, just exhaustion. I could almost hear the emptiness behind it. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I closed my laptop, took a deep breath, and walked to the window of my new office. The city stretched below. Endless movement, people rushing, life going on. Somewhere out there, Martin was probably wondering where it all went wrong. And I knew the answer. It wasn't because I'd outsmarted him, or because karma had a taste for irony. It was because he'd built everything on fear, control, and performance. I'd built mine on relationships, respect, and truth. In the end, his structure collapsed under its own weight. Mine kept growing. 3 months after taking my new position, Global Tech officially acquired several of Veridian's former clients. I didn't lead the negotiations, but I did attend the final signing meeting out of curiosity. The moment the deal was finalized, Patrick Miles, Veridian's CEO, walked over to me. I hadn't seen him since the day I resigned. He extended his hand awkwardly. "Carla," he said, "I'll be honest. I didn't see any of this coming. We should have protected you." "You were right about everything." I shook his hand. "It's okay, Patrick. Sometimes it takes losing something valuable to understand what you had." He nodded slowly, eyes heavy. "If you ever want to come back?" I smiled gently. "Thank you, but I'm exactly where I need to be." And I meant it. That night, after the meeting, I took a walk along the river. The air was cool. The city lights reflected on the water like scattered stars. For the first time in years, I wasn't replaying old conversations or rehearsing what I should have said. I was just still. Revenge, I realized, isn't about destruction. It's about restoration. It's about taking back the dignity that someone tried to strip away, and rebuilding a life so solid that their opinion no longer matters. Martin thought pulling that cable would silence me, but it didn't. It simply disconnected him from the truth. That respect can't be forced, and power without integrity is just noise. A few days ago, I received my first annual performance review at Global Tech. The last line of Elena's report made me smile. "Carla has redefined what leadership means in this organization. She leads not through fear or hierarchy, but through empathy and precision, a rare combination that has become our company's greatest strength." I closed the report and sat quietly, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not the kind that demands applause, but the kind that comes from surviving without losing yourself. Because that's the real victory. Not the fall of the person who wronged you, but the rise that happens afterward, when you rebuild, quietly, honestly, and better than before. If anyone watching this has ever been humiliated, underestimated, or dismissed, remember this. You don't have to fight fire with fire. Sometimes the best revenge is simply turning your pain into proof that they were wrong about you all along. And the day they realize it, you won't need to say a word. I knew it the moment he walked in. This wasn't going to end well. Day one, under the new leadership, the mahogany conference table gleamed like it was ready for an execution. And judging by the smirk on Ethan's face, my boss's freshly promoted son, it probably was. He leaned back in his father's old chair, shoes up, tie loose, trying to look like some tech visionary instead of the spoiled legacy hire everyone knew he was. "All right, team," he began, voice dripping with performative confidence. "Things are going to change around here. We're running lean, agile, no more outdated processes. Translation, chaos, but with branding." I sat there quietly, fingers curled around my mug, watching him pace like he was auditioning for a leadership TED Talk. His eyes swept across the room. Finance, operations, R&D, and landed on me. I'd been there 11 years, built our first logistics algorithm from scratch, held the team together through 3 mergers and 1 near bankruptcy. But none of that mattered now. I wasn't his person. "If you don't like the new rules," Ethan said, smile curling like smoke, "there's the door." The room froze. Someone coughed. I think I even heard the AC click louder than usual. He said it like he was testing me, waiting for me to flinch, to beg, to play the loyal veteran. Instead, I took a slow sip of my coffee and said, "Thanks for the exit strategy." You could have heard a pin drop. He blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" I smiled. That calm, unbothered kind of smile that comes from realizing you've already won a battle they don't know started yet. "You heard me." I closed my notebook, slid my laptop into my bag, and stood. I didn't raise my voice, didn't slam the door, didn't give him the satisfaction of drama. Just walked out. I could feel the eyes of my team following me. Some were shocked. Others, like my assistant Maya, looked terrified. She mouthed, "What are you doing?" as I passed. I gave her a small nod. "Stay. Observe." Outside, the early morning sun was sharp, cutting through the glass of the lobby. I walked past the reception desk, my badge still warm in my hand, and placed it neatly beside the visitor log. That was the moment, the click of the plastic card on polished marble, when my career at Holland & Gray officially ended. But my story? That was just beginning. I drove home in silence, city traffic flowing around me like a pulse. My apartment was small, cluttered with half-finished prototypes and coffee-stained notebooks. The kind of space where ideas grow wild, and occasionally dangerous. I opened my laptop, logged into my encrypted cloud, and stared at the folder labeled Atlas. The company thought Atlas was just an R&D experiment, a dead-end logistics simulator I'd tinkered with off the clock. What they didn't know was that Atlas was alive. A fully operational optimization engine capable of predicting disruptions before they happened. Weather, supply shortages, even political blockades. It didn't just respond, it anticipated. And every line of code was mine. I'd built it after hours, using my own equipment, my own funding, documented everything, backed up on multiple servers, time-stamped, notarized, witnessed, legal foresight disguised as obsession. When Ethan told me to leave, I didn't panic. I'd already seen this coming the moment his father announced succession planning. Ethan didn't want experienced engineers. He wanted yes men and cheap interns who'd call him a genius. I just hadn't expected the fall to come this fast. So when he handed me the door, I took it and brought my blueprints with me. I spent that first week off-grid, mostly working out of a quiet co-working space near the river. Cheap rent, good Wi-Fi, Nobody asked questions. The place smelled faintly of burnt espresso and ambition. I liked it. By Wednesday, my attorney, a no-nonsense IP specialist named Carla, had already filed the provisional patent for Atlas under my name. Not the company's. Mine. Carla looked at me over her glasses. You understand what this means, right? Once they realize what you've done, they'll come after you. I smiled. Let them. Because here's the thing. Ethan thought power came from titles, offices, and inherited authority. But real power? It lives in documentation, in data trails, in proof. He could have my old cubicle, my parking space, even my ergonomic chair. But he didn't own my mind, or my work. That Friday, I sent a short email to the company's general counsel. Per our previous employment terms, please note I am asserting independent ownership over my intellectual property developed outside company resources. Documentation available upon request. Lisa Wren. No threats, no emotion, just fact. They didn't respond. Not yet. But silence in corporate law is never peace. It's pressure building. And deep down, I knew Ethan, with his arrogance and impulsive bravado, wouldn't leave it there. He'd go digging. He'd push back. He'd try to reclaim what he thought was his father's empire. Only this time, he'd find that the empire had already been rebuilt. And it didn't belong to him anymore. I thought leaving would bring silence. But the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was pressure. The kind that hums in the air before a storm. 3 days after I sent that email to legal, I was sitting in the co-working space, half listening to the sound of the espresso machine hissing like a bad temper when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Lisa Wren? A male voice asked. Yes. This is Thomas Reed, corporate counsel for Holland and Gray. I'd like to discuss your recent message. There it was, sooner than I expected. Of course, I said. Email works best. I think a conversation would be faster. Then I'll record it, I replied. Silence. Then a clipped, we'll be in touch. Click. I leaned back and smiled. They were nervous. That was good. Nervous people make mistakes. By Thursday, Ethan finally reached out, via a forwarded email chain from his assistant. It was short, arrogant, and exactly what I expected. Lisa, your work during your employment remains company property. Any attempt to claim otherwise will be treated as a breach of contract. Ethan Gray. No greeting, no signature. Just digital chest thumping. I read it twice, took a sip of my cold coffee, and typed a reply. Ethan, my work done during employment is indeed your property. Fortunately, what you're trying to relaunch wasn't. Lisa. Then I attached the provisional patent confirmation from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Filed, accepted, timestamped. I didn't get a response after that, but I didn't need one. Because by Friday morning, the whispers had already started. Maya texted me first. They're calling it Helix. You might want to see this. Attached was a screenshot from the company's internal newsletter. Helix, the next evolution of predictive logistics. They were relaunching Atlas, my system. Same interface, same language. Even the same placeholder text on the demo screen, text I'd left intentionally when I walked out. But here's the part they didn't know. I'd never uploaded the full logic. Atlas wasn't just an algorithm. It was layered architecture. Each function referenced a separate encrypted key stored locally on my private drive. Without those keys, the code would execute, but not learn. It would look functional, right up until it faced real data. Then it would break, beautifully and completely. I didn't design it to sabotage. I designed it to protect, and now it was about to do exactly that. The following week, the company announced a live Helix demo for investors. I found the stream online. Of course, they made it public. Ethan stood on stage in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. Behind him, a slide glowed with words like revolutionary, adaptive, proprietary technology. I actually laughed. Proprietary. Sure. He started the presentation with practiced charm, talking about innovation, synergy, and a new era of smart logistics. His voice trembled just slightly when he said his team had developed Helix. Then came the live demo. A world map appeared on screen, dotted with simulated supply routes. Colored lines pulsed as the system optimized them in real time. The crowd murmured approval for about 20 seconds. Then the red lights appeared. First one, then three, then the entire map started blinking with error flags. The projected graph behind him flatlined. A loud system alert echoed through the hall. Error. Logic reference not found. The audience went silent. Ethan froze. A technician rushed onto the stage, whispering frantically in his ear. He nodded, tried to play it off. Just a minor configuration issue, he said, smiling too wide. We'll restart. They didn't. The restart triggered another cascade of red. The demo collapsed in front of 200 people and a live stream audience. That error message, the one in red, bold letters, it wasn't random, because I'd written it myself. Property of Lisa Wren. Unauthorized execution detected. That message wasn't in the codebase. It was buried 3 layers deep inside the fallback logic, invisible to anyone who hadn't built it. I hadn't meant for it to ever surface. But when they copied my architecture without the keys, it triggered automatically. A digital signature that couldn't be erased. I sat in my small co-working booth, coffee going cold again, watching Ethan's face lose color on live stream. He stammered, turned to the side, whispered to someone off camera. The feed cut a minute later. My phone buzzed nonstop for the next hour. Maya. 2 developers I used to mentor. Even one from finance. Lisa, what did you do? They're saying your code sabotaged the product. Security's freaking out. Ethan's losing it. I didn't reply. Because I hadn't sabotaged anything. They'd sabotaged themselves. That night, I walked by the river, the city lights flickering across the water like broken reflections. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't even smiling. Just thinking. A year ago, I would have stayed. Tried to reason. Tried to fix things from the inside. But I'd learned that in corporate wars, logic doesn't save you. Documentation does. And now they were learning that lesson too. Somewhere in that glass tower, Ethan was realizing the truth. Atlas was never his father's legacy to inherit. It was mine. And this was just the beginning. By Monday morning, the story had already started leaking out. Not publicly, not yet. But internally, the air around Holland and Gray was crackling with fear. The failed Helix demo had been a humiliation no PR spin could fix. Investors were calling. Clients were asking questions no one could answer. And Ethan? He was invisible. Maya sent me a message at 7:12 a.m. They've called in legal. Full audit of all software assets. They're pulling logs, commit histories, everything. I stared at my phone for a long moment, then set it down beside my coffee. I'd expected this, but not this soon. It meant the panic had reached the boardroom. And panic in a boardroom always leads to mistakes. By noon, I got another message. This one from a blocked number. Ms. Wren, this is Karen Duvall, outside counsel for Holland and Gray. I'd like to schedule a brief call to discuss your involvement with certain development materials. There it was, the polite voice of a lawyer trying to sound calm while sitting on a grenade. I agreed to a video call that afternoon. Her background was the typical corporate setup. Neat desk, law books behind her, calm face that didn't match the tension in her eyes. Lisa, she began, folding her hands. We're reviewing internal inconsistencies regarding a system called Helix. We've discovered a code attribution conflict that appears unusual. Unusual, I repeated. That's one word for it. She didn't smile. Some of the modules bear your digital signature. They should, I said evenly. They're mine. She hesitated. Were these materials developed while employed at Holland and Gray? No, I said. All development occurred off-site, on personal equipment, with notarized documentation and third-party witnesses. I can provide copies. Karen took a deep breath, the kind lawyers take when they realize their client is in trouble. You're aware this could cause serious repercussions for the company? Yes, I said softly. That's why I warned them. She blinked. Warned them? I emailed legal 2 weeks ago before the demo. They chose not to respond. Karen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. Quiet realization. I'll need those documents, she said finally. You'll have them within the hour. When the call ended, I sent the entire file set. Patent filings, timestamps, Git commit logs, notarized witness statements, even screen captures showing my original development environment. Proof stacked higher than corporate denial. That night, my phone buzzed again. Maya. Ethan just stormed out of the building. Board called an emergency meeting. People are saying the patents might be valid. They are valid, I texted back. Lisa. What's going to happen? I stared at the message for a while, my fingers hovering over the screen. What always happens when the truth finally shows up? The next morning, I got another call. This time from someone I hadn't heard from in months. David Chan, the company's CTO before Ethan's father retired. Lisa, he said quietly, I heard what's happening. I just wanted to say, you did the right thing. They've been playing with fire for years. His voice carried that weary respect only people who've survived enough corporate battles can offer. They're going to come after me, David, I said. They'll try, he replied. But they don't have the footing. Ethan didn't just break internal policy. He violated the IP protection clause his own father implemented. That's ironclad. I almost laughed. The same clause I'd helped draft 5 years earlier. The same one that now protected me. By Wednesday, the audit findings reached the board. A friend in accounting forwarded me a copy of an internal memo. Anonymously, of course. It was short and brutal. Preliminary review indicates that proprietary code used in the Helix system originated from external, independently patented sources. Immediate suspension of all related projects recommended pending legal resolution. In other words, Helix is dead. Ethan's silence became its own rumor. Some said he was in meetings with crisis PR firms. Others said he'd been advised to take temporary leave. Whatever it was, his name disappeared from company announcements overnight. And yet, I didn't feel triumphant. Just still. That Friday, I went for a walk near the river again. It was cold, the kind of cold that clears your head. I stopped at the same cafe I'd worked in after I left, ordered my usual coffee, and sat by the window watching people hurry by. For years, I'd lived for that company. Missed holidays, worked weekends, built systems that saved millions. I believed loyalty meant safety. But the last few weeks had proved something I wish I'd learned sooner. In corporate life, loyalty isn't protection. It's leverage. For them, not for you. That realization wasn't bitter. It was freeing. As I sat there, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Maya. Lisa. They want to talk settlement. I heard from HR. Karen's preparing a call. Settlement. The word tasted strange. I typed back, tell them I'll listen. But only if Ethan's in the room. There was a pause before her reply. You really think he'll agree to that? I smiled to myself. The city lights reflected in the glass. He doesn't have a choice anymore. Because the truth wasn't mine or his anymore. It was on record. And once something's documented, no amount of arrogance can erase it. The storm hadn't passed. It was just beginning to rain. They scheduled the meeting for Friday at 10 a.m. sharp. A mutual discussion regarding IP resolution. The email said, as if polite phrasing could soften what was about to happen. I'd been in enough of these to know how it would start. Calm introductions, legal disclaimers, then the slow pivot toward intimidation. But this time, I wasn't the one on the defensive. The Zoom window opened to 4 small squares. Karen, the company's outside counsel, looking exhausted but composed. Two board representatives and Ethan Gray himself sitting in his father's old office. The same office where I'd once spent nights fixing code while he was still in business school. He leaned forward, trying to project authority. "Lisa," he said flatly, "thank you for agreeing to speak." "Of course," I replied, matching his tone. "It's always nice to talk to people who used to sign my paychecks." Karen's voice broke the tension. "Let's keep this professional, please." She began with formalities, acknowledgement of the audit findings, the potential overlap between my patents and the Helix system, the pending review from the U.S. Patent Office. Then came the proposal. "Holland and Gray is prepared to offer a settlement," she said. "An acknowledgement of contribution and financial compensation in exchange for full transfer of the Helix-related intellectual property." I let the words hang in the air. Ethan's jaw was tight, his impatience obvious. "How much compensation?" I asked. Karen glanced at her notes. $200,000. I smiled, not kindly. "That's cute." Ethan frowned. "Lisa, let's not pretend this is worth millions. It's a logistics algorithm. It's a predictive logistics system that your company tried to relaunch without understanding," I said calmly, "and then publicly humiliated itself with." He shifted in his seat, glancing at Karen, who looked like she wanted to disappear into her blazer. "I don't want your money," I said. "I want acknowledgement, written, public, and filed with the USPTO, confirming the intellectual property belongs to me." "That's not—" Ethan started, but Karen raised a hand. "Lisa, that's a substantial request. The board may not approve a public statement like that." "Then they can explain to the Patent Office why their internal audit confirmed I own the code," I said, "and why their VP ignored a cease and desist warning before the Helix demo." Karen blinked. "You have documentation of that warning?" "I do," I said. "Email timestamps, legal proof of receipt. I'm sure your forensics team already found it." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with unspoken panic. Ethan's face went pale, but he masked it quickly, trying for that boardroom confidence again. "Lisa," he said slowly, "this isn't how things work. You don't just walk away with proprietary systems." I tilted my head. "I didn't walk away with them, Ethan. You tried to walk away with mine." Karen exhaled softly, like she knew the call was already lost. "Lisa," she said carefully, "if we issue formal acknowledgement, that will effectively end Helix and any projects derived from it. Are you aware of the implications?" "I am," I said, "and maybe that's the point. The company needs to learn that innovation doesn't come from intimidation." Ethan leaned closer to the camera, his voice tight. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "No," I said truthfully, "but I am finished being silent." For a long moment, no one spoke. Karen finally said, "I'll confer with the board and get back to you within 48 hours. "Take your time," I replied. "Just remember the patent clock doesn't stop ticking." I ended the call before anyone could respond. The room around me was quiet except for the faint hum of my laptop fan. My hands were steady, but my chest felt heavy. Not from fear, but from finality. I'd spent years building that company's future, only to be erased by someone who believed titles outweighed talent. And yet, here I was, rewriting the ending. At noon, my phone buzzed again. "Maya, you should have seen the board after the call. They looked terrified." Ethan left mid-meeting. Karen stayed behind with the CFO. Rumor is they're drafting the statement. I typed back, "They'll do what's right eventually." "You think he'll survive this?" she asked. "No one survives pretending to own what they don't understand," I replied. That evening, I went for another walk by the river. It was windy, the kind that makes the city lights shimmer on the water. I thought about all the people like Ethan. Inheritors, not builders. The kind who think control is the same as creation. And I realized something that felt both sad and freeing. People like him never really build anything. They just rearrange what others make until it breaks. My phone buzzed again. An email this time from Karen. Lisa, please find attached a draft acknowledgement for your review. Pending final signatures, Holland and Gray will confirm your sole ownership of the Atlas patents. The company will also withdraw all references to the Helix project from its public materials. I read it twice, then exhaled slowly. The storm, after weeks of pressure, had finally broken. The company hadn't just surrendered a project. They'd admitted the truth. But what I didn't know yet, what none of us knew, was that Ethan wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The statement went public on a Tuesday morning. Simple, clinical, and exactly what I'd asked for. Holland and Gray acknowledges that the predictive logistics framework known internally as Helix originated from independent intellectual property developed by former employee Lisa Wren. The company has ceased all use of related materials and withdrawn any public references to the project. No apology, no dramatics, just truth, printed in black and white. Within hours, it was everywhere. Tech news blogs, industry forums, even LinkedIn feeds filled with quiet admiration disguised as professional commentary. Rare case of a developer winning against corporate overreach. One article read. Another headline simply said, Engineer 1, Empire 0. I didn't celebrate. I just sat in my apartment, coffee in hand, rereading the statement until the words stopped feeling real. For once, silence felt peaceful, but it didn't last. 2 days later, I got a call from Maya. Her voice was shaking. Lisa, something's happening. IT found out Ethan tried to pull copies of the old Atlas files from the company archive. He used an admin override to bypass the lockout. I closed my eyes. When? Last night. Security flagged it as unauthorized access. Legal's involved. Of course he had. Ethan had always believed rules were for other people. I could almost picture it. Him sitting in that glass office, sweating under fluorescent lights, desperate to prove he still had control of something. He's not going to stop, Maya said quietly. He's blaming you for everything. I almost laughed. That's fine. I've spent my whole career being blamed for fixing other people's messes, but this time the mess wasn't mine. That evening, I got an email from Karen, the lawyer. Lisa, for your awareness, there's been a breach investigation regarding Mr. Gray's activity. The files he attempted to access were secured under the Atlas patent filings. The system flagged and logged his credentials. We'll keep you informed. Translation: they had him. 3 days later, the story broke. An internal leak? Maybe from someone in IT, maybe from someone who'd had enough. Headlines spread across the same networks that had once celebrated Helix. Holland and Gray VP under investigation for data misuse. Sources confirm unauthorized access attempt after patent settlement. The fallout was instant. The board suspended Ethan pending review. His name vanished from the leadership page within 24 hours. When Maya called again, she sounded different. Calmer, almost relieved. They walked him out this morning, she said. Security escort. No speech, no goodbye. Just gone, I sat in silence for a moment, trying to process the finality of it. It wasn't joy I felt. Just a strange, heavy quiet, the kind that comes after a long storm finally burns itself out. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said softly. I think I am. I spent that weekend cleaning my apartment, tossing old notebooks, archiving old files, deleting backup drives I no longer needed. It felt symbolic, a purge, not out of anger, but release. By Monday, I had a message waiting in my inbox. Not from Holland and Gray, from a small logistics startup in Chicago called Origin Systems. I'd met their CEO once at a conference years ago. The subject line read, "Let's talk." Their message was simple. They'd seen the article, admired the way I'd handled the situation, and wanted to license Atlas legitimately. No politics, no ego, just partnership. It took me a full hour to decide before replying. Let's talk. But this time, it's on my terms. We spoke the next day. The deal wasn't flashy, smaller than what Holland and Gray had promised years ago. but it was clean, respectful, transparent. Everything the last chapter of my career hadn't been. 2 months later, I found myself in a new office overlooking the river. Different company, same skyline. But this time, the name on the patent, the badge, the contract, all of it was mine. Sometimes I still think about Ethan. I picture him somewhere out there, scrolling through articles that used to quote him as an innovator, now replaced with headlines about misconduct and corporate theft. Maybe he learned something. Maybe he didn't. But that's not my story anymore. The last time I heard from Maya, she'd resigned too. I couldn't stay after what I saw, she told me. But I'm starting my own thing now. You taught me more than you realize. That meant more than any patent ever could. I walked home that night as the city lights flickered on one by one. The streets were quiet, the air cool. I passed the Holland and Gray building out of habit. Same logo, same glass facade, but a different world now. Through the window, I could see someone new sitting in Ethan's old office. Maybe they'd learned, maybe not. But either way, it wasn't my battle anymore. I paused just long enough to whisper, "Thanks for the exit strategy," then turned and kept walking. Because in the end, that's what this had been all along. Not revenge, not rebellion, but freedom. The kind that only comes when you stop waiting for someone else to value your worth. The kind you earn, line by line, proof by proof, until the world has no choice but to see it.